What's up guys, it's Nav here. So fletching is an interesting skill for Ironman, as it's an artisan skill supported by woodcutting, and unfortunately nearly all the best methods to training woodcutting don't actually give you logs that you can use for fletching. And on top of that, when it does come to logs when training woodcutting, a lot of people prefer to cut mahogany or teak logs to help support their construction training. Now this isn't too detrimental because fletching honestly doesn't offer much to Ironman in general. Apart from the ability to turn certain logs, such as yew and magic logs, you may come across into bows, which you can then high alchemy for gold. Along with that, fletching is a skill requirement for a number of important high-level quests for Ironman, such as the Branches of Darkmere, River of Blood, and Within the Light. Now, one important thing to be aware of as an Ironman is not too long ago the Fletcher's outfit was made available within the game for Ironman. This has gotten through the Stealing Creation minigame for 5,000 Stealing Creation reward points. For anyone unsure about how that minigame works, I have actually made an in-depth guide about the process of getting this outfit on my channel, so check that out for more info. So getting into the actual guide, from level 1 through to 20 fletching, you do want to make arrow shafts. Now, this is slightly slower than beginning to make short bows from level 5 to 10 fletching, and then moving on to shield bows from 10 to 20 fletching, but arrow shafts are actually something you will need later down the line, although if you are a completely new Ironman, you may actually benefit from the gold for selling the short and shield bows. Now, from level 20 through to 50 fletching, it is a very simple and repetitive process of cutting oak and then willow logs and turning those into short and shield bows based on your current level. And up until this point, you never want to be using any bowstrings you may have and just simply selling the bows as unstrung. And quickly, for those who are relatively new to woodcutting and fletching, oak trees are found all around Runescape, but I personally like cutting them just south of the West Varrock bank. And for willows, there are plenty just below the Draenor bank. So once you're 50 fletching, you are able to fletch maple logs into short bows, and once you're 55 fletching, you can make maple shield bows. Now, this is a particularly important stage for Ironman leveling fletching, as maple logs are the first resource you will be encountering that can be farmed in bulk outside of the woodcutting skill. Now, the way of doing this is through the Kingdom of Miscellanea. Now, for those who are unaware of this content, essentially it's a kingdom you have control over on an island unlocked through questing, and this kingdom will produce certain resources for you, depending on how you allocate the subjects within this kingdom. So quickly to overview how the kingdom works, it's unlocked through completing the Throne of Miscellanea quest, where you will have 10 subjects to distribute who will collect resources for you, and the capabilities of the kingdom are increased to 15 subjects through completing a second quest, Royal Trouble. Now, in terms of purely focusing on the fletching skill, the most subjects you can have collecting one type of resource is 10, meaning you technically do not need to complete the Royal Trouble quest, but I do advise you try to, as it will make you more efficient as an Ironman. So once you have completed the Throne of Miscellanea quest and have access to the kingdom, you want to put 10 subjects into maple log woodcutting, and also to keep your approval rating at 100%. Now, the approval rating is seen at the top of your screen whenever you're on Miscellanea, and is increased to 100% by helping out around the island. I suggest cutting the maple trees to do this because it's easy to find and straight to the point. Now, along with keeping the kingdom at 100% approval rating, you do need to have money in the kingdom's coffers, which will be reduced by either 50k or 75k daily, depending on whether you have 10 or 15 subjects. Now, having to revisit this place and also pay it daily does sound like a chore, but it's certainly worthwhile, as in doing this it will collect you 892 maple logs and 8 birds' nests daily, so long as there's always enough gold to cover the daily fee and also remains at 100% approval rating. On top of that, this doesn't need to be collected daily and can store for up to 6 months before it will reach the maximum limit and no longer accumulate resources for you. So technically, even if you don't manage to visit the kingdom daily, you will still be accumulating maple logs, though slightly less depending on how low you let your approval rating go. Now, if you were to go from 50 to 55 fletching, making maple unstrung short bows, and then maple unstrung shield bows from 55 all the way to 99 fletching, that would take 110,454 maple logs and cost 6.3 million gold in kingdom upkeep fees over 126 days, assuming you're only paying 50k gold per day for 10 subjects. and that isn't even factoring in a 6% experience increase from the Fletching outfit, bringing those figures down to 103,827 maple logs, costing 5.85 million gold over 117 days. Now, I personally don't advise this, but if you were to wait that long for the maple logs to accumulate within your kingdom, it would then only take you roughly 133 hours of fletching unstrung maple shieldbows to go from 55 all the way to 99 fletching. Now, funnily enough, another strong method of leveling fletching does come in at a similar time. Once you're 52 fletching, you can make broad arrows. Now, there are two other requirements before you can do this, which is completing the quest Smoking Kills, and once that is completed, purchasing the ability to make the broad arrows from a Slayer Master for 300 Slayer points. Now, leveling fletching through broad arrows is unfortunately not as straightforward as fletching unstrung shieldbows, and requires the daily hoarding of multiple materials. So first we'll take a look at broad arrowheads themselves. These are only gotten through buying them for 50 GP each from Slayer Masters, or through killing the Slayer monster Kurusks, which do require level 70 Slayer to kill, although I don't recommend killing Kurusks as they don't drop broad arrowheads frequently enough to justify the time investment. So back to buying broad arrowheads from Slayer Masters. Between the Slayer Masters is a total stock of 6,000 broad arrowheads you can buy daily, with an additional 3,000 broad arrowheads being available from the Bandit Duty Fee vendor, found in the Bandit camp, which is in the wilderness. So for buying the 6,000 broad arrowheads, I personally bought from the Slayer Masters next to the Canifus Lodestone, and also the one just east of Tavali Lodestone. But again, before you can do this, you must have completed the Smoking Kills quest to begin purchasing the 6,000 broad arrowheads daily, which would cost you 300,000 gold daily. Now, unfortunately, the daily tasks don't stop there. So to make broad arrows, there's two aspects: the broad arrowhead, which we just discussed, and the Headless Arrows, which are made by combining arrow shafts with feathers. So the most efficient way of collecting feathers is to also buy from vendors. Now, there's a total of 11 vendors you will be buying 1,000 feathers from each, costing a grand total of 66k gold daily, for 6 gold per feather. Now, unfortunately, to access all 11 vendors, there are a variety of quests required, which include Animal Magnetism, the Fremennik Trials, Shiloh Village, the Jack of Spades, and to at least have started the quest as a first resort. Now, if you haven't completed all those quests, it isn't a big deal as long as you're able to buy at least as many feathers as you're buying broad arrowheads. So hypothetically, if you're buying 6,000 broad arrowheads per day, you want to at least be buying 6,000 feathers per day. So just quickly going over the locations of the shops which sell 1,000 feathers each, they are found northwest of the Lumridge Lodestone, directly north from Port Sarum Lodestone, south of the Al Kharid Lodestone at the Shantae Pass, north of the Draenor Lodestone within Draenor Manor. This one requires the completion of Animal Magnetism. Northwest of Ardone Lodestone within the Fishing Guild. Now, to enter the Fishing Guild, you unfortunately do need to have 68 fishing. South of Uglog Lodestone. Now, this one does require you to at least have started the quest as a first resort. West of the Fremennik Province Lodestone in the Relica Marketplace. Now, this one requires the completion of the Fremennik Trials quest. Now, once you've visited the Relica Marketplace, it's advised you use the boat to get to Miscellanea, and at this point it is a great opportunity to get your approval rating to 100% again, as the approval rating will drop by a percentage each day. Once you're on Miscellanea, there are 2 feather vendors in both kingdoms on the ground floor in the outside market area. Next is the Shiloh Village vendor, easily gotten to by using the Karajama Lodestone and running north to the cart, which you can use to quick travel there. This vendor does require the completion of the Shiloh Village quest. And lastly, we have the vendor in Menaphos, just south of the Menaphos Lodestone, and this does require the completion of the Jack of Spades quest. And the last element required to complete a broad arrowhead are the arrow shafts. Now, these are gotten through fletching any type of log, although I would never recommend fletching yews or anything higher into arrow shafts. And the simplest way of acquiring bulk arrow shafts will actually be through collecting maple logs within the kingdom. So considering we've discussed this in detail previously when talking about maple shortbows and shieldbows, I won't go into any further details about it since it's the exact same method, putting the maximum amount of subjects into maple trees and simply turning those maple logs into arrow shafts. So next we'll look at going from 52 all the way to 99 fletching with broad arrows, in regards to both cost and time. So first, taking a look at the cost. So without the use of the full Fletcher's outfit, you will need 785,327 broad arrowheads, and costing 50 GP each, that comes to a total of 39.26 million gold. Next, there are the feathers. Just like the arrowheads, you will need 785,327 and costing 6 GP each, that comes to 4.7 mil. And lastly, we have the kingdom upkeep cost. So each maple log gives 30 arrow shafts, meaning you will need a total of 26,177 maple logs. And if we're getting 890 maple logs daily for 50k each day, that comes to a total of 1.5 mil. Now taking a look at the cost with the outfit, giving 6% bonus fletching experience, we need 738,207 broad arrowheads, costing 36.9 mil. And obviously that means we would only need 738,207 feathers as well, costing 4.4 million. And lastly, would only need 24,607 maple logs, costing 1.4 mil. Next we'll take a look at the time it'll take simply to collect all three resources to go straight from 52 to 99 fletching. So without the fletching outfit, to buy a total of 785,327 broad arrowheads will take 88 days, and that's if you are buying the maximum 9,000 broad arrowheads daily. Or it will take 131 days if you are only buying 6,000 broad arrowheads daily, which doesn't involve the risk of going into the wilderness. Next, the feathers. To purchase the 785,327 feathers required will take 72 days. And finally, the maple logs required from the kingdom for the arrow shafts will take a total of 30 days, assuming your kingdom is always kept at 100% approval rating with enough gold to be deducting the daily amount. And of course, now taking a look at the 6% bonus with the outfit, for the broad arrowheads it will take 82 days if you're buying 9,000 arrowheads a day, or 123 days if you're only buying 6,000 broad arrowheads a day. For feathers, it will now take 68 days buying the maximum 11,000 feathers possible, and lastly for the arrow shafts, it will take 28 days to get the 24,607 maple logs you need. So as you can see, the fletching outfit certainly does make a difference, saving you a few days for each resource and a few million GP, although it isn't the end of the world if you aren't able to get it, considering stealing creation is dead most of the time, and regardless of whether you have the fletching outfit or not, once you do have all the supplies, making broad arrows is extremely fast experience, giving roughly 550k fletching experience per hour. So it's safe to say the hardest part of this method is simply keeping on top of the daily shop runs and always having the gold required to purchase everything. Now one thing I realized that I want to highlight in regards to fletching broad arrows is using online fletching calculators isn't exactly reliable, as they won't factor in the experience gained by making the maple logs into arrow shafts or by turning those arrow shafts into headless arrows. Now you may imagine that isn't much, but say you didn't have the fletching outfit and were looking to make broad arrows, from making 785,327 arrow shafts and then headless arrows, you would be getting 1.13 million experience, and getting the remaining 11.7 million experience from making broad arrows. So just be wary when doing your own calculations with online tools that assume you're just simply buying the headless arrows. Next, I do want to highlight daily challenges. Now, every day you're given one challenge for a random skill, and upon completing it, you're rewarded experience, and depending on which skill, given a mystery bag. So like every artisan skill, fletching daily challenges are very rewarding because you can get even more experience out of your supplies. Now all fletching challenges will require you to make strung shortbows or shieldbows, meaning it requires you to use bowstrings, which aren't always easy to come by. Now I will discuss methods of farming bowstrings later in the video, but I personally don't recommend doing fletching daily challenges before level 52 fletching, as until this point, the challenges will require you to make either willow bows or lower quality, and I personally don't think the experience from making those type of bows or handing in the challenges is worthwhile considering it will be using up your valuable bowstrings. Although, as of level 250 fletching and beyond, you will start getting challenges for maple bows and better, which I feel is well worth the investment, and if you are interested in looking at the fletching daily challenge chart for yourself, I'll leave a link to that in the description. So that's actually everything in terms of effective training methods available to Ironmen, which you can farm daily and work on, and I now just want to talk about farming fletching materials in a more general sense as an Ironman. So, as an Ironman, you realistically never want to be cutting magic or yew trees for the sake of fletching, as unfortunately, even with a decent woodcutting setup, with a decent woodcutting level and hatchet, and not AFKing, you can only expect around 300 to 400 yew logs per hour, and around 100 to 150 magic logs per hour. And that does pale in comparison to what you can get through PvMing, along with the other benefits of killing monsters, such as combat experience, and other resources, and even unique boss loot. So the number one place I found for picking up tons of magic logs was God Wars Dungeon 2. So I personally spent quite some time soloing all 4 of these bosses, and each time recorded all the loot, keeping track of the amount of kills along with the time taken, for the purpose of making videos which are all now on my channel. So for this reason, it was actually pretty easy for me to dig up those notes, to take a look at the drop rates of magic logs I was getting from each boss. Now, I do want to highlight the fact that PvMing statistics are somewhat subjective because of the RNG involved with loot, along with the fact I was soloing the bosses in mainly tier 80 gear, so those variables will mean you may get slightly different results yourself, but regardless, I feel it's still a relatively interesting example of how you can amass magic logs. So breaking each boss down of the 4 bosses in God Wars Dungeon 2, first taking a look at Gregorovich. So this boss drops anywhere between 150 to 217 noted magic logs at a time, and is listed as a common drop on the Rune Wiki. Over 30 hours, I personally managed to kill this boss 496 times, amassing a total of 9,333 magic logs. So that total number over the course of 30 hours averages to 311 magic logs per hour. Next, taking a look at Hellweir. This boss drops anywhere between 150 to 248 noted magic logs at a time, and is listed as a common drop on the Rune Wiki. So, over 30 hours, I personally managed 599 kills, and ended up with a total of 9,443 magic logs, and that averages out to 315 magic logs per hour. Next, taking a look at the Twin Furies. So this boss drops anywhere between 180 to 241 noted magic logs at a time, and it is listed as an uncommon drop on the Rune Wiki. So over 22 hours, I managed 463 kills and a total of 2,868 magic logs. So this averages out to 130 magic logs per hour, which as you can tell is significantly less than both Gregorovich and Hellweir, but still, in my opinion, is better than getting magic logs through woodcutting magic trees. And looking at the final God Wars Dungeon 2 boss, Vindicta. So this boss drops anywhere between 165 to 250 magic logs at a time, and is listed as an uncommon drop on the Rune Wiki. So I did kill this boss over 25 hours, and managed 354 kills, getting a total of 5,844 magic logs. Now over those 25 hours, that does average out to 234 magic logs per hour. So looking at those examples, we have Hellweir and Gregorovich still very close to each other at 315 and 311 magic logs per hour, with Vindicta and Twin Furies being somewhat less, but that was expected considering the drop rates suggested online. Now, if you were interested in farming magic logs within God Wars Dungeon 2, but unsure which boss you should go with, I'd personally recommend Hellweir. Not only for the potential magic logs, but his other drops include Noted Dwarf and Lanterdime, which are great for Ironmen, along with the fact he can potentially give a full set of tier 80 magic armor with tier 85 magic weapons. So if you do commit enough time to this boss, you will end up with a really strong magic set. Now honestly, I couldn't find too many examples of bosses dropping great quantities of yew logs that I'd experienced, but based on my experiences, at Hard Mode Giant Mole, I personally got 2040 noted yew logs over 500 kills, taking 20 hours. So this came to an average of 102 yew logs per hour, unfortunately not beating the average amount you could get woodcutting. And it was a similar story with Araxi, over 291 kills, getting roughly 5 kills per hour. I managed a total of 7,800 yew logs and 3,364 magic logs. So this averages out to 58 magic logs per hour and 134 yew logs per hour. So certainly not game changing either. So from those examples, if you do have plenty of food and potions and looking to PVM for some fletching supplies, I'd certainly advise you consider Hellweir, as it's a very rewarding boss in many aspects for Ironman. So next I wanted to take a look at some of the random fletching supplies you will need in fletching training that can be gotten through PVM and also other means. So first we'll take a look at bowstrings. Now these are obviously very useful to string Yew and Magic Unstrung Shieldbows for not only fast experience but also to high alchemy for decent amounts of gold. Now unfortunately making bowstrings through spinning flax certainly isn't recommended unless you're level 1 crafting and need the crafting experience. But nevertheless, there are alternatives. So the first thing I tested out was Dagannoth Kings. Now this one was a little confusing, as there's currently no information online stating that you can get bowstrings there. But in fact, Dagannoth Supreme does drop noted bowstrings. Now again, I can't say for sure the exact amounts, but after camping Dagannoth Kings on fast respawn for 1 hour, I did only get one noted bowstring drop from Dagannoth Supreme, and that was for 231 bowstrings. So if I had to guess, it's likely an uncommon or even a rare drop from Dagannoth Supreme from anywhere between about 150 to 300 bowstrings at a time. Although currently that's purely speculation based on my 1 hour of testing, so if anyone knows of a reliable source or even a video testing this further, definitely post it in the comments, as this really could be a fun way to potentially farm bowstrings if possibly I was just unlucky with the bowstring drops. Next, I wanted to test out the Slayer monsters recently added to the game, being Seekers requiring 71 Slayer and Soul Gazers requiring 99 Slayer. So first up, testing Seekers over 1 hour. These drop 15 noted bowstrings at a time at a common rate according to the Rune Wiki. Now over the course of an hour, I did manage to get 150 bowstrings, which isn't great, but considering it was relatively easy, and they also drop other types of supplies, including dungeoneering tokens, I don't think the overall loot here is bad, and it also only requires 71 Slayer. And just to add on to that, I did manage 2,100 dungeoneering tokens over that hour, although I had to use the dungeoneering token drops as they don't stack and drop in piles of 100 tokens at a time. So you do unfortunately just have to take my word for it. And next, taking a look at Soul Gazers. These do drop 20 noted bowstrings at a common rate and also has 2 unique drops, being the tier 80 Hex Hunter bow and the Soul Gazer pet at a very rare rate. So these do require 99 Slayer to kill and were significantly harder to kill, and over the hour I did manage to get a Soul Gazer elite spawn, which was significantly harder, but it does also have a much better chance at dropping the Hex Hunter bow and pet. Now this elite was a lot more effort than I would have liked, needing a full yak of rocktails just to kill it, but regardless, over the course of an hour, I did only actually manage 140 bowstrings and 1,300 dungeoneering tokens, and of course everything else that you can see in my inventory. So of these two monsters, if you were strictly after bowstrings and even dungeoneering tokens, I would actually recommend Seekers, considering Soul Gazers are significantly harder to kill, meaning you get less drops which are equally common between both monsters, with the only obvious benefit to killing Soul Gazers being the potential of getting the valuable Hex Hunter bow or the pet. And lastly, before we move on, I just want to add, along with their Slayer level requirements, you do need to complete the Dishonor Among Thieves quest to access this area and kill either of these monsters. And the last method of farming bowstrings, which blew all 3 of these prior methods out of the water, was temple trekking. Now I know a lot of people really don't like this minigame, so I did do my 1 hour of testing, only completing easy paths, meaning as long as you've completed the quests, the Darkness of Halavale, and in aid of Maya Q, you should be able to do this pretty easily. So after an hour, I did manage to get 36 easy reward tokens, which do reward anywhere between 30 to 90 bowstrings each time. And after redeeming all of those tokens, I did have a total of 2,322 bowstrings, which as you can see is miles ahead of the competition and therefore is the recommended method of farming bowstrings. So the last two materials I did quickly want to go over was farming headless arrows and also feathers. So as we discussed earlier, the most efficient way of farming feathers over time is purchasing them from vendors. But if for whatever reason you want to commit all your time to getting more feathers outside of the shop runs, then there are alternatives. So the first and most obvious method of collecting feathers is to kill chickens. This can be done wherever you like, with northeast of Lumbridge having a fenced area with plenty of chickens to kill, and it is recommended to do so with area loot turned on. Now doing this, you should expect around 2,000 feathers per hour, though I wouldn't really recommend anyone doing this unless you're a completely new Ironman who would benefit from the small amounts of combat experience. And the final method we'll be looking at for feathers are killing sword chicks. So these are only accessible after completing the Tower of Light quest, and also comes at the expense of 1 raw swordfish and 1 raw chicken per kill. Now over an hour you can expect to get around 6,000 feathers, which does sound great, but it does come at the cost of 250 or so raw chickens and raw swordfish. So unless you have tons of raw swordfish lying around, the time it takes to fish those would then bring that average feathers per hour down significantly and would make it really not worth the time. Now the final method of resource farming I wanted to discuss was headless arrows from glaciers. Now these drop in quantities of anywhere ranging from 100 to 600 at an uncommon rate according to the Rune Wiki, and in my experience killing them over 12 hours, I did manage 1,109 kills with a grand total of 23,474 headless arrows. So this does average out to 1,956 headless arrows an hour, which in itself isn't amazing, but it does come along with the amazing magic experience and also many other drops, including some pretty cool looking tier 85 tank boots. So that just about wraps it up for this video, but just for a recap, remember to always do your fletching challenges above level 52 fletching, keep on top of your kingdom, always making sure to have 10 subjects on maple logs, try not to miss your daily shot runs for feathers and broad arrowheads, and if you're looking to PVM but want to level fletching, consider the bosses in God Wars Dungeon 2 and in particular Hellweir. But that is it for me. Thank you for sticking with me if you've managed to get this far into the video, and if you would prefer these guides to be shorter, let me know and I will consider splitting the future videos, with maybe the first video discussing all the actual training methods, and then there being a second video with all the in-depth information I like going into. But on that note, I will end it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.